All right, hello everybody. I am BMillzebub, and welcome to my channel. For today's Apostate interview, we have kind of a newcomer on the scene. We've got Triateyal. Did I say that right?
Nope, but that's
Oh,
okay.
okay. Did I at least come close?
You came closer than a lot of people.
All right, that's good. 'Cause I kind of pride myself on being able to say things right, and oops. So you've already told me it's okay to just call you Tria. So
Yeah, Tria or Tria is cool. I don't know why. I just find it amusing that the name that I just smashed a bunch of syllables together, everybody mispronounces. I find it amusing. So, I mean, I came up with this name when I was 14 and I didn't care about how complicated it would be. I was just like, it sounds pretty.
yeah, it's kind of like me with my channel name.
Yeah. Watching everybody, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it too. Watching everybody mispronounce it is interesting.
Oh yeah, I have fun with it. I think Luciano's pronunciation of my name might be my personal favorite,
I
but
don't remember. I don't remember what it is. But
the
yeah.
BMillzebub. All right, but yeah, so we're actually here to talk about you, as fascinating as a person as I am. So you've only got a couple of videos up on your channel, but why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. My channel is basically stuff that I've always complained about not hearing enough about. I do asexuality and ex-Mormon videos. Sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes it's both. My next one's going to be an ex-Mormon video. It's been taking me a while because it's kind of an emotionally labor-filled one. But after that, I plan on doing a video on difference between sex drive and sexual orientation because the two are often conflated, and it kind of drives me a little bit nuts that it does so. So that's basically what I do on my channel. I'm, if there's anything else that I feel like I need to bring up, I'm not going to let the fact that that's my main thing keep me from doing so.
All right. All right. Well, let's get into a little bit more the apostasy end of things, because that is the basis for these interviews. So, what religion did you once upon a time believe in?
I believed in the Mormon Church. Um, and that was pretty much born and raised, never went to any other religion. Um, that was that was pretty much my background. Um, was being a Mormon my up until about the time that I was 19.
All right. Uh, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person who does this, but like, is there really that much of a difference between like Mormons and JWs? Because
I have been watching Nacha's videos, and there are definitely some distinct differences, but there are moments where I'll watch what he's talking about and kind of have flashbacks to having been Mormon, and it's really because I'll sit there and say in the chat, Nacha, what are you doing to me? Um, which she finds amusing. I'm like, I can't wait until you start watching my stuff because I'm going to give you flashbacks. I'm certain that there are things. Um, I, I don't know what a lot of the differences are, but I do know that one of the big ones is that Mormons do believe in a version of hell. Um, but my understanding of Jehovah Witness is after Armageddon, anybody who's not going to paradise is just annihilated. Um, and so that's technically not hell. That's basically you're gone from existence. Um, I have seen the kind of clothing is very similar. It's if you don't know what the differences are, you can kind of you almost could confuse the two sometimes. Um, and as far as like the intensity, how much church takes over your life, that is definitely the same. Um, it's very intense. Your entire life just damn near about revolves around your church life for both of them.
All right. So how did your life kind of revolve around the church?
Oh man, I loved church. My parents didn't really have a lot of trouble getting me to go to activities, with the exception of a few. Um, I I went to everything without like too much resistance. And when I say, and the thing is that there are a mountain of activities that they say aren't required, but they kind of are. Um, but let me give you an example of what my high school life was like. I had regular high school. I wasn't homeschooled or anything like that, so I did get at least some time away from like the church, the church um, for a few hours. But during high school, every day that you had school, you had an hour of seminary class, which was basically um, whatever set of scriptures they picked for the year, either the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, or the Pearl of Great, and I think, Pearl of Great Price. Um, and then, um, hold on a second.
Okay.
I said 6 to 8. I apologize. That was my dad.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
He's an old bear and he forgets times. Um, but there basically you had every year of high school you had like an hour of scripture study essentially before school. Then in my case where I lived, I was assigned Wednesday night activities with other young women from the ages of 12 to 17. There was an hour and a half every Wednesday night. Then you had 3 hours of church on Sunday. You had family home evening on Monday nights, which was also a requirement. And it was church mandated. It was like this night you are supposed to have family quality time, which that in itself isn't bad, but it was usually overloaded with like scripture study and like, let's make the family time about church. Then you had firesides on at least once a month where you would go and hear more lectures about what you were supposed to be doing. You had volunteer service once a month on a Saturday, and you'd basically spend like somewhere between 5 or 6 hours doing volunteer service of some sort, which was also like they said it was optional, but it wasn't optional for any of us that I remember. Then you had temple trips, and depending on where your temple was, about once every 3 months, that could be an all-day trip. I mean, basically, like your schedule as a teenager, if your parents were active and were forcing you to go to all of these things, you basically had no time for anything outside of that.
Yeah, from what you've been saying, it kind of sounds like really the only free time you got was at school, and I'm assuming you had to sleep at some point. So
Yeah, I mean, they gave you some time to sleep, but it was basically like you didn't have a lot of free time. And I understand that it's not really the case now that there's so many activities that they're trying to back away from some of them, and that a lot of people are kind of being more moderate because they're kind of learning that, hey, I can't do this whole my life has to be the church thing, especially when there are points that I disagree on. And more people are actually starting to kind of think for themselves and kind of see through some of the church's issues. You still have quite a few members who are ride or die, but I'm seeing more and more people kind of trying to float somewhere in the middle, which is almost unheard of when I was a kid.
All right. So considering all that, how much you loved church and all the time you spent going, what is it that got you to start asking the right questions to move away?
Um, a couple of things, and I can't go into too many details because some of the things that happened are not exactly my stories to tell, but I will at least go into the ones where I was directly involved in. Um, my my mom was our biggest advocate. My mom, like, no matter the problems that we had, like, we had a strained relationship, but if something went down, I knew I could go to my mom and get it fixed. The unfortunate side effect of that is in the Mormon church, it is a major, major sin to criticize something or complain about something. And if my mom saw something wrong with us kids, she would speak up. My little sister has spina bifida. She's open about that, so I know she wouldn't be upset over me saying that. But it seemed like a lot of times the church wanted my mom to shut up and go away until they had to deal with my sister themselves, and then they wanted my mom to come and take care of it. And so the summer that I was the summer that I was graduating, um, everything blew up. They started demanding more out of my sister. They started demanding more out of my mom, and my mom just went off on everybody. And I started seeing more and more how my mom was just trying to make things better for us, but she was getting stopped completely by everybody because they just basically wanted her to shut up and go away and have my sister not be a nuisance for them. Um, that kind of that started to really heat up right as I graduated, and that was one of the things. The other thing is I'm asexual, and at that time I was also aromantic. Um, the um, and so when I was in high school, you're not really allowed to seriously date until you're 18. You can go on group dates and stuff, but you're not really supposed to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And so, like, growing up being aromantic and asexual, I didn't care. So I was pretty much left alone. But then that summer, they they started like dropping like all kinds of not so subtle hints about how I was supposed to be working towards getting married, and I wasn't doing that. And so I had members of the uh, I don't know how to call it. We call it the bishopric, but it would be, I guess, the pastors would be would be the term for somebody non-denominational. But um, they kept pulling me to the side and telling me that I needed to start getting a boyfriend, that I needed to start dating. Here's the young single adults ward, which we ever so lovingly called the dating meat market. Um, and it is a meat market. You go to the young single adults ward, you don't come out without somebody. Unless you're really, 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 there's something considered really wrong with you. Um, but um, and I kept getting told, "Hey, you're failing your husband, you're failing your children, you're failing your parents, you're failing yourself. You know, if you don't get if you don't get cracking on getting married, you're going to wind up going on a mission, and you're going to have to go on a mission to make yourself more pleasing and more interesting to the boys, and it just it finally got to a point where I started asking questions at the adult scripture study that I was going to. We we had a lesson where it basically said the only way you can be worthy to have everything that the church promises is to be married, and if you're not married, you're unworthy for that. And I asked for clarification, and then the next week I wound up in the bishop's or the pastor's office, um, saying that, you know, if I had questions, I didn't need to ask the teacher, I needed to ask God. And just all of those things kind of just built up and was like, you know what? This doesn't feel right. It may be right for me in the future because I wanted to continue to believe. Um, but it was like it's not for me right now. So I left, um, and I had tried to fix myself, um, which wound up getting I wound up getting a boyfriend essentially that used me like a toy. And afterwards, I was so scared of going to the bishop for help that that was kind of that was the final nail in the coffin, basically. It was like at that point I was never going back because I knew that if I went back, I would not make it out alive. Like really not make it out alive.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was verbal diarrhea.
oh, you're fine. You're fine. I just think it's kind of interesting that you said it was the pastor told you that you weren't really supposed to ask a teacher a question.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot if you ask the wrong question. Like, if you ask the right question and you accept the answer given, then that's a good thing. But if you ask the wrong question or you don't accept the answer given, then that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know all too well about the difference between right and wrong questions because we had.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
Mormonism
a
isn't the
remember.
only one that does that. Yeah, Mormonism isn't the only one that does that, but I think Mormonism acts the most scared when it comes up. Because if you get too loud, they will kick your butt out. That is the only reason they'll ever kick you out, is if you're too much of a nuisance. But like, eh, yeah, that was a kicker for me, and it was just like, okay, so if I'm not allowed to ask questions and you're telling me to go to God, then why in the hell do I need you?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, there are going to be as many different religions as there are people. But I mean, I just think it's interesting that they told you to go ask God when there was a question too hard to ask them. Partly because God's such a talkative fellow.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that I now know, like, because I was growing up, I felt a lot of things growing up. But, like, I felt very, very close. I felt like I actually had a personal relationship with God. I felt like he was not just like my God, but my heavenly Father. He was my father, he was my dad that looked out for me. He was the person I could turn to, the person for my troubles. You know, that kind of thing. Which is really, really pushed. But then I realized that most of those experiences happened while in the church building, and that a lot of those situations where I felt that were orchestrated to have me feel that way. And while I love I love a lot of the aspects of my upbringing, I also realized that my feelings were very, very manipulated.
All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. What is it that got you to start making videos for your channel?
Um, I had I had started watching Purple Rhymes with Oranges live streams and Lavender Lady's live streams. Um, Maddie had mentioned that Lavender Lady was dealing with health issues, and I wanted to get to know her a lot more. And I don't remember if it was Lavender Lady or if it was Purple that let me come on. But somebody was asking me a lot of questions about being ex-Mormon, and they just basically said, "All right, well, since you're pretty much the only one in the chat, and you're like typing 500 words a minute, come on in and just, you guys can have the conversation without you having to type so much." I think is kind of what happened. Um, and then I was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to hang out in live streams. I'm kind of enjoying live streams and stuff. And then and then a few different people were like, well, why don't you just make videos? And I kind of resisted at first, but then I was like, I'm talking so much, I might as well make my own channel. Like, I'm still going to come around and bug everybody, but I'm going to make my own channel too. So that's kind of what it is. And like I said earlier, a lot of what I want to put on my channel is stuff that I don't think we're talking enough about. As an ex-Mormon, I noticed that most of our biggest spaces are filled with guys. And while it's a good thing for us to have people who have a lot of listeners, like Mr. Atheist, it's kind of disheartening to not hear the female side of what happened, because the experience is very, very different for girls. Or and like, there's stuff in the Young Women's program that we never discuss that really should be, because long term it is so harmful that some people wind up committing suicide over it. And it's stuff that I wish we were hearing more about. And also, sometimes when you go into ex-Mormon spaces, a lot of times, because it is so guy oriented, sometimes we don't even really feel comfortable saying those things. So I kind of want to make a space where, like, the people who don't normally get heard, or the stories that we keep being told that we're not supposed to say, I want those on my channel. And I hope to do a good job with that.
All right. Why do you think it is that there are so few ex-Mormon? I think, honestly, there's fewer female ex-religious voices in general, but, do you think it has something to do with, like, what Mark Caesar just said in the side chat? Women are supposed to be silent in religion, and that just sort of...
Yeah, that has a part to play with it. Just because you leave a church doesn't necessarily mean that you alter your views. And and also, sometimes altering your views is a process. It's taken me a full 15 years to completely change how I view things. And I'm still trying to change them, because I realize that there's stuff up there that does not align with what my sense of morality is, but I have to undo that in my head. So those two things kind of are at play. Some people just never even do the self introspection to try to change. They just change. They basically just leave because they're mad, and they change the flavor, but they don't change the necessarily the main ingredients. Or it just takes so long to deprocess, because Mormonism often takes up your entire life and shapes your entire worldview.
All right. What were some of the differences between the male and female experience in the Mormon Church?
I can only kind of speak theoretically because I don't have any brothers. I never had a husband. Hell, I didn't even have any boyfriends in the church. So, but pretty much the church wrapped its entire male program around the Boy Scouts for the most part, as far as activities went and things like that. So they'd go camping, they'd do derbies. I can't remember what they're called. They basically would build uh, a cart of some sort and then race them. I know there's an official term. I can't remember it. Um, they'd learn how to use knives, do knots, and then the girls program, we would do things like, and granted, some of these things are good in theory, but you also have to remember that how hard we were being pushed for marriage. Stuff like we would make a hope chest where we would put things in that we would think would, um, be little things like mementos, stuff that we would want on our wedding day, things along that nature. We did a night where we did our makeup and our hair, and we got dressed up in temple dresses, and then held a bouquet of flowers and like took wedding shots in front of a backdrop of the temple. Um, we basically learned babysitting skills. We learned basically it was all geared towards you're going to get married and you're going to have children, and so this is the stuff that we want you to do.
So barefoot, pregnant in front of a stove training, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. I mean, there were some times where we didn't do that, but that was the main hammered home theme for us.
All right. Yeah. I kind of feel sorry for girls growing up in religion because I think a lot of it is kind of the same across the spectrum. Girls are pushed a little harder to get married than guys are. And I think part of it is because of the longevity of ability to have children. Technically, men never stop being able to.
Yeah. Um, well, and I mean, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen in other religions. It's just the level of intensity and the amount of pressure, and like you get started on being told that your entire goal in life is to get married at 3. And it's basically presented in a way of, do you want to live with your family? Yay! Do you want to live with God and Jesus? Yay! Do you want to grow up and be a god someday? Yay! Well, you have to get married in the temple. So it's basically taking an idea that is already in society and happens to other people, but it is taken in such an extreme that it really messes with your brain. And there are other religions that I know do purity balls, and it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah,
It's
those are great.
just yeah, like I said, and I do admit that the pressure is there for people outside of Mormonism, but some cults like Mormonism take it to an extreme.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to compare my understanding of what the pressures of getting married for women in the Catholic churches are, the pressure's kind of down here, but what you're describing, Mormonism's like I don't know about
I
50.
don't know. I think it kind of depends on how deep into Catholicism you are too, because I've heard some people, including friends, say that they got damn near about the same amount of pressure. Maybe it didn't start as early, but they got about the same amount of pressure. So, but then again, my understanding of Catholicism is you can range from people who just show up on holidays to people who their lives are wrapped around Catholicism as much as I was wrapped around Mormonism too. So I think that's entirely situational.
Yeah, that is a fact. You know, it's they're called cradle Catholics, the Catholics that only appear on like Christmas and Easter. Um, but what I'm understanding from what you're saying and what every other ex-Mormon I've ever heard talk on the subject say is that everyone's life is just completely wrapped up in the Mormon Church, and like you said, and I've heard someone else say from like the age of 3, Mormon girls are, they're having weddings talked up to them.
Yeah, I vaguely remember my Sunday school lesson on it, and I thought that I was just making it up. I was like, surely they didn't start me on that early. The wonderful thing about Mormonism is while they have a lot of things and not all of it makes sense, I can always go back and verify what I was told because they have everything listed on their website. So I went and looked at the nursery manuals and I looked at the nursery is basically from like 6 months to 3 years old. And at 3 years old, you go into primary. And so I looked at all of those lessons. I looked at the primary lessons. I looked at the nursery lessons. I was like, surely they didn't start me on this from the beginning because pushing children to think about that is really awful. But then I looked and I was like, holy crap, I didn't make that up. And I've had a lot of moments like that where I was like, surely I made this up in my head. I must be exaggerating because I am that angry at the church. And then gone back and confirmed it.
Maybe you should do a video on that because that's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, that is in the works at some point. Like I said, I do kind of want to focus on asexuality since it's Pride Month this month. I do have one video that I'm working on, but I already have dozens of videos already kind of lined up in my head. It's just a matter of which ones I'm going to get to first. But definitely something coming out of Mormonism is your reality is so twisted up. You've been lied to so much, you've been gaslit so much. So much of it is like, okay, that is so far out of what is considered healthy and normal that surely can't have happened. I have to be making it up because I'm angry at the church that I grew up in. And then you look and you're like, holy shit. No, this is what actually happened.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to that video whenever you get to it because that's about as fascinating as it is disturbing. But what would you say the goal of your channel is ultimately?
Honestly, part of the reason why I started this was, like I said, I want spaces where we talk about things in things that we either ignore or don't necessarily always feel comfortable about. I want spaces for people to be able to speak up and feel good about doing so. Um, I want, and I also kind of I've also tried to go through therapy a few times, and I have had to try to uh, I've had to basically educate my therapists, and I've heard that a lot too. And I think by relaying some of those experiences and putting them in video form, maybe somebody can go to them and say, hey, this is what I'm talking about, and here's why it's bothering me so badly. My channel is going to be mostly a venting and education channel, um, because, I, like I said, we don't have the places where we can talk. We don't have the places where we can talk, and we're often having to try to educate everybody around us. And sometimes that's just emotionally hard.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm really not a fan of explaining or even saying something more than once. I just don't seem to have the patience for it, and there are people out there that do, and that's laudable. But
Yeah, like I've had so many different things. Like the last therapist that I went to one that said that they were LGBTQIA friendly because a lot of my things that I need therapy for are interrelated with the Mormonism. It's the asexuality and the Mormonism are not disconnected. I need both. I need both in order to get what I need. Um, and the last session I went into, I clicked off the atheist box. I said, I am an atheist, don't want to talk Christianity. I do want to talk about what happened to me at church, but I need to not have somebody pushing me for another denomination. I also clicked the box that I was asexual, and I also clicked the box that I was a sexual assault survivor. And in a matter of 2 or 3 sessions, the person recommended like this thick ass book about different Christian denominations that she wanted me to research. I told this particular therapist that things were hard between my dad and I because I was leaving the church and it was hurting both of us, and I wanted to figure out how to deal with that. And that was she never even acknowledged that I said that. Um, I said that I was asexual, and she tried to treat me like I was secretly gay. Uh, and then I said, okay, well, I am having my sexual assault has made it so that I cannot date at all because I will not I was like, I don't trust men. I can't trust men for dating purposes. I can trust them as friends, but not for dating purposes. And I want a lifetime companion, but I can't do that if I'm avoiding every single opportunity to do so because it feels like a life or death situation for me. And she said, well, you'll know how to handle it when that time comes. And that's not an odd therapy session for me. That's actually like usually it's not all of those at once, but usually when I go into a therapy session, that's kind of what happens is something is so off that it's like I'm not going to be able to get the help that I need. And the problem is that a lot of therapists treat Mormonism like it's just another Christian denomination, or they treat asexuals like they're secretly gay. And let's fix your libido. So, yeah,
that's not at all helpful.
no, it's not. And unfortunately, my experience is actually pretty common for
It,
both ex Mormons and aces.
is this like a actual therapist or
I
like?
don't know. I thought it was. I did my research. It was online and I did my research. I thought I did it well. It may not have been an actual therapist. It may have been a trap. The problem is that I have had actual therapists do similar things, either because they don't completely understand or because uh, it's like I said, a lot of a lot of therapists think, oh, she just left a Christian denomination, we'll just replace it with another one. And they don't understand the full extent of what Mormonism does to you.
All right, so let's actually talk about asexuality a little bit. For everyone in the audience who may not know, can you explain just a little bit exactly what that is?
Asexuality is a long-term pattern of not feeling sexual attraction to anyone, or there are certain circumstances where you will feel sexual attraction. but it's only under those certain circumstances. It often gets confused with a allosexual, what we call non-aces. Um, that a lot of non-aces say, "Oh, you just mean a dry spell," or "Oh, they're like, I'm ace, I'm having a dry spell." It's not the same thing. For me, I have only ever felt actual sexual attraction once. And even that, sometimes I'm fuzzy about whether I actually was or not. Um, because like I said, when I was in high school, I was both aromantic, not romantically attracted to anybody, and asexual. And basically, my entire high school career, I thought two guys were good to look at, and I enjoyed looking at them, and that's kind of where it just stopped for me. It was like, you're pretty to look at. And so that's kind of how my asexuality works. Now, I there are specific circumstances for some people. They build enough of an emotional bond, and the sexuality will kick in for them. I am not one of the. I am not one of those aces.
Okay, so basically, what you're saying is you would look at, say, an Adonis like myself and be like, that's exactly the same as looking at a pleasant tree.
Pretty much. Pretty much. And a really pretty tree. The tree has to be really, really pretty. Like, really pretty. I think my aesthetic attraction currently only kicks in for about 3 people. So it's 2 or 3, and one of them I go back and forth because sometimes I'm like, "Eh." Um, but yeah, I mean, in high school, there were a couple of guys I thought cute. I giggled over them with my best friend, and then, like, that was it. I didn't want to date. I didn't want to touch. I didn't want sex. I just for me, that was it. I was like, "I just wanna look at your prettiness."
Oh god.
Yeah, and the thing
But
is
I
that
had to go and make that joke.
yes, I know, I know.
Had to do it.
I can't blame you. I probably would have done the same thing in your situation.
Uh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I'm also aromantic. Or well, I'm not completely aromantic. I'm on the aromantic spectrum. It takes me 7 years of being a close friend with a guy before I actually start to feel romantic attraction. And it can't be 7 years since I met them. It has to be like 7 years of a really super close friendship before I'll even see them as an attractive person.
Hmm. All right. Um, I recall hearing, I think it was you mentioned the term sex repulsed. Is that fairly typical for asexual people, or?
I don't know. That is our stereotype, and I've met a lot of sex repulsed aces, but I have also met quite a few who actually do enjoy sex when the circumstances are right. Um, you know, but I personally have never liked sex. I was sex repulsed before I was even assaulted, because I know some people would probably be like, "Well, you just admitted you were assaulted, so that's what made you ace, and that's why you're sex repulsed." It made it worse. It made the whole situation worse. But I was honestly repulsed beforehand. I know aces who are into kink. I know aces who really want to make their partner happy, and that turns them on. I know aces who don't even like to be their hands held. So it ranges, and I think that that's also another complication is it ranges from I don't want to be touched to if it's under the right circumstances, I'm all for it.
So basically, like pretty much everything else in life, it's a spectrum. There's nuance.
Yeah, there's nuance. Not all of us are the same, and it's also that's why I think it's hard sometimes to define asexuality, because it's hard to say, "Hey, I don't have this lack of, I have this lack of something," so it's kind of an abstract feeling. Like I know what sexuality is in an abstract form. I know what sex means to sexuals in an abstract form, but it's still a foreign concept to me. So sometimes it's very, very hard to define that. And sometimes it's also hard to determine whether or not you're asexual, because in certain situations, some asexuals have about the same amount of drive as an allosexual.
All right. I remember the term allosexual from the sex ed video I did with Luciano and Atheistic Snail. I'm just not.
Allosexual is basically anybody who's not on the on the asexual spectrum. It's basically, if you're not on the asexual spectrum, that's usually the term we use for everybody else. And I see Mark Caesar's question, but I don't know how to answer it. I honestly don't know what my exact boundaries are sometimes, because sometimes I can be don't touch me at all, and sometimes I can be very, very I fall into a very gray of where this is borderlining on actually being sexual. That's why I call myself a gray ace. Is because the lines can be blurry and can depend on time of year, mood, uh, you know, certain things cause me flashbacks. It just it's not, I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to fit into into a label that does not accurately describe what I go through. I'm not forcing myself into the label fits me. I don't know if that answers your question, Mark.
Yeah, and for everything else, there's consent.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also another complication, is because I dance at that blurry line, because where people define sex is going to actually be slightly different for everybody. What defines a sexual act has a lot of context to it and a lot of a person's individual experience. And my line with a person I trust is pretty damn near jumping over that blurry line. Um, it I don't ever quite get there, but it's pretty close. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I don't often bring people into my life in a relationship way, Mark, because sometimes I think I will be fine with the situation and then I'm not. And that's partially why I really want therapy so badly, is because I need to learn what those signals are so that I can create those boundaries.
And Russ wants to know your feelings towards pigs, more specifically, frustrated pigs.
I'm all right with Russ. I don't have too many opinions on pigs.
Even if it's like a adorable little potbelly pig.
I, potbellies are all right.
That's fair.
I'm more of a, as you can see in my thing, I'm more of a taper gal for some reason. Insert ex-Mormon joke here.
See, I don't know too many ex-Mormon jokes. What is the...
Okay, so the taper in my logo, and it's one of a couple of symbols in there, because, like I said, I started my channel with the I started my channel with the intent of doing both ex-Mormon and asexual stuff. So there's elements of both, but the taper, the Book of Mormon, which is the main scripture that Mormons go to for scripture study and Sunday school and everything, had several inaccuracies in it. And one of them was horses in a time period in America where they couldn't exist. And so some guy named Daniel Peterson, and I don't think he has any relation to Jordan, but some dude named Daniel Peterson said, "Oh, well, he didn't mean Joseph Smith didn't mean horses, he meant tapirs." And so that was one of those I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that kind of thing? That ex-Mormons were like, "Ooh, this is fun. This is fodder for us to play with." And now a tapir is kind of a symbol of ex-Mormonism because it's like, yeah, the horses were tapirs. You can totally use them for chariots. You can use them for riding. So if you see somebody with a tapir symbol, they might be ex-Mormon. And the Mormons wish we'd forget this, but we never will.
You never should.
No. Mormon apologetics. If you ever want to see Mormon apologetics, you can go to Fair Mormon. That's just a trip and a half. It just is. The mental gymnastics they do there is just it's wild.
All right. Do you have any like long-standing series planned for your channel?
I'm kind of just winging it and seeing where it goes. I know I should probably plan better, but it's so new and I don't know what this is going to do at this point. Right now, I'd just like to have I'd like to have a place where things can be talked about openly. Um, places where people feel comfortable to talk, where they feel welcome, and to try to open as many people's minds as I can get away with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I started my channel, I didn't have any long-term plans either, and honestly thought I'd run out of material before a year was up, and I'm still here and I'm nowhere close. So I think you'll be fine. But Jen Morgan has a question for you. Are people who have been able to have sexual relations for reasons other than desire, are they also asexuals as you define it?
Yes. Sexual actions are not the same as sexual attraction. And there's so many different reasons to have sex. You can be having sex to make your partner happy. You could have found that partner that turns you on, but it might just be only that particular partner. Or you might be turned on because of your kink, and do an act because of your kink. You might want to be pregnant. There's so many different reasons to have sex. In fact, I've had sex, so by that definition, if I were to define it by sexual acts, I would automatically be disqualified, and so would several of my friends. So there's a few old guard that do try to define it by whether or not you've had sex, but I fall into the category of your sexual acts don't define what your orientation is.
Apparently okay, yeah, I read it wrong. Are people who have not been able to have sexual relations for reasons other than desire? Yeah, I read that wrong. Sorry, Jen.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. The thing is that if you have sexual attraction, even if you're not able to act on it, unless it's under specific circumstances, or it or it's super, super rare for you to feel sexual attraction to somebody, that's where the definition is for me. And the thing is that, again, we're talking about a lack of something, so it's kind of abstract. And it's also not for me to define for somebody else. I can give you resources. I can answer questions about my own experiences. I can answer questions about the experiences of people that I know, but I'm not going to go around and being like, hey, you fit into this box. I will help you try to figure it out for yourself, but it's really up for other people to define.
All right. And I've got one more question for you, and that is there anything from Mormonism that you're still having some trouble getting over? And as like an example with me, sometimes I sometimes still slide back into the Catholic thought about sexuality where anything other than what I am is kind of weird. That happens sometimes, unfortunately. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I've got a few. Let's see. For me, public displays of affection sometimes, depending on how intense it is sometimes almost too much for me. Um, and I know logically that's wrong, and I support people, and I want people to be able to show their affection for each other. But that's also kind of paired with the ew gross feeling. Although that may not just be the Mormonism, that may also be my sex repulsion. Um, because like I said, it varies from day to day. Certain times of year where bad things happen to me, I don't deal as well. Um, and then, um, and then I have had to get over. Um, there's a lot, but I'm not thinking of them right now. Um, I also have to. Sometimes I have to wonder whether or not my desires to have a companion are actually mine, or if there's sometimes leftovers from being taught that that's what I need to be. Because honestly, when I get into a relationship, I'm usually not happy. I am far happier single, and so I sometimes wonder if that's actually what I want, or if it's because I was never given the option to decide whether or not I wanted that.
All right. I got one more. Oh, hang on. So,
Yeah, Russ is being goofy in there because he
yeah.
realized things are getting tense.
Uh,
I was not allowed to watch Ninja Turtles, so I don't know which one. Please don't shoot me.
you missed out.
Uh, there was a lot I wasn't allowed to watch. Mormons have lots of rules, and a lot of them include your parents don't like this, so we're going to claim that it's against church standard. And I'm pretty sure Ninja Turtles fell under that one instead of non-church standard. Um, Kind of like Batman. I'm not like I have different levels of fandom, and uh and Batman's one of the ones where I enjoy. Like I can't really talk or talk about facts and stuff, but if somebody said, "Hey, we're going to go see a Batman movie," I wouldn't be like, "No, I'm not going to go see it." I'd be like, "Sure, let's go buy tickets. Let's go." Yes, I realize that there's only one answer and only one right answer, Russ, but I have so much to catch up on. I was only allowed to watch PG rated stuff for most of my life. So,
The Ninja Turtles wasn't PG back then?
again, my mom, there were some things where gone back and watched. I was like, okay, my mom just said it was against church standard because she was annoyed and she didn't want me watching it. Like, she didn't want it around her. Um, Same with like Sailor Moon. Like, my mom absolutely hated Sailor Moon, but I look back and there was absolutely nothing wrong with at least the first 3 seasons.
All right. Well, I like to start and end my interviews the same way, and that's by having my guests talk about their channel a little bit. So, could you talk about your channel a little bit again?
Yep. My channel is basically education and venting about asexuality issues and issues dealing with the Mormon Church. I'm wanting to create a space where people can come talk, ask questions, share their own experiences, even if it's only tangentially related. You guys are all welcome to come over. I'm basically an open book. As long as it's asked in a sincere fashion, I tend to not mind questions. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can all come ask me. I don't mind. Um, and that's pretty much what my channel's about.
All right. And you'll be able to find Tria's information in the description box below: Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So head over to all 3, give her a follow. She's pretty awesome, and look forward to seeing more content coming onto your channel in the future.
Yep, hopefully I will have my next video out by the end of the weekend, but I don't know if I said this on air or off air. It's kind of an emotional labor one, so I can only work on it so much at a time before I'm just completely drained. But I'm shooting for having it out this week.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this one. Thank you again for coming on my channel and talking to me. Had a pretty good time.
Thank you for having me, Bub. Thank you so much.
Take it easy, everybody.